And this is more of Jesus talking with his disciples as they journey towards Jerusalem and towards his death on the cross. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist," and others, "Elijah," and still others, "one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said all of this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Jesus called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." This is the good news of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. That was one of my favorite travel experiences of all time. I was taking a cross-country trip from LA to Appleton, Wisconsin, where I was going to start serving as the associate pastor of the First United Methodist Church there. And it was my last day of the trip, July 4th, 2002, and I made a stop in Austin, Minnesota, and visited the Spam Museum. Yes, Austin, Minnesota, which is in the southern part of Minnesota, almost at the border, is the home of Hormel Meat Company, and hence the home of Spam. And as I've been traveling towards Austin, I had, for quite some miles, been treated to some fabulous billboards that really piqued my attention. There was like a can of Spam, and it would say like, come, or, I've got my notes here, I can't remember them all of them. They were see famous porks of art. The Guggenheim doesn't have free samples. Where Hawaiians go on vacation. And my favorite, you'll still be thinking about it come Iowa. I was this must be just really something. And so I got to Austin, and I was wondering if the Spam Museum might be open because it's the 4th of July. But indeed it was, and I even got to Austin in time to be treated to their 4th of July parade down Main Street, and it included, of course, a giant can of dancing Spam going down the street, throwing out candy. I know, it should have been throwing out little chunks of Spam, but then you should probably have them in those little toothpicks so you can eat them better. And when you're throwing out something with toothpicks, it's all going to end in tears. So it's just as well that that was candy. So after the parade, I went to the Spam Museum, and I just want to show you a few things that you get treated to when you go to the Spam Museum. So, first of all, I'm going to try to show it here. This is the entrance to the Spam Museum, and as you'll see, there is, get this new camera, there is this giant statue outside with a farmer leading a couple of pigs, and behind him there's a bucket of slop. Inside, there's this brightly colored, happy lobby, and there's a lady at the entrance that tells you not only is the Spam Museum free, but you want to be sure before you leave the lobby to check out the giant wall of spam. These little dots here, those are all cans of spam. In fact, I'll tell you there's 3,390 cans of spam that make up the giant tower of spam. Why is it that number? Well, because that's all that fit. And I love that it has a little electronic ticker tape underneath it to give you that kind of Times Square feeling. But you know that you're not in the Big Apple. No, you're in the big parts. But that's what the giant tower of spam. And then the woman at the desk, who, by the way, is a spam ambassador, that she'll tell you. Honest to gosh. And so then she suggests that you want to be sure to walk over to the other side of the lobby and check out the George Hormel movie theater, where you're going to be treated to the film Spam, A Love Affair. And indeed, it's this 10-minute film that talks about spam in our culture, including some rousing tunes by the Spamettes, this group of women, that sing Mr. Spam Man, like Mr. Sandman, and Stand By Your Spam. And honestly, they take this to the county fairs, and they're quite popular. And then you get to visit or have an interview with, his name is John Nagamuchi Cho, who is the proclaimed Grand Master of Spam-ku. That's right, he writes haiku about spam, and he set up a website, and thousands, tens of thousands of people have made their contributions about haiku about spam. So spam-ku is a big deal. You didn't know it, now you do. And last but not least, there's an interview of this plump, pimply-faced kid who is the Guinness World Record holder of owner of most spam t-shirts. Yes, he's got thousands of t-shirts because they create all these spam t-shirts, and he's got each and every one, and he'll tell you, you know, the girls used to thought I was nerdy, but now they think I'm kind of cool. You know, so you love that, you're like, oh, I can't wait to see what's next. And you get a little bit of history about spam. Here's the Hormel brothers. Before they had spam, they were just another meat distributor. And then you get to see the handoff of George Hormel handing off the keys of the kingdom to Jay Hormel, who was the creative genius who came up with spam and meat that didn't need to be refrigerated, which ended up actually being quite a good thing because, as you may know, spam was one of the staples of food for our troops in World War II. And because they couldn't get access to fresh food, and so spam was very popular. And here we have an exhibit of the soldiers, and there's Dwight Eisenhower there. I wonder why it's Dwight, though. It should really be Patton, because when you think about spam, you think about the soldiers that were in the Pacific, at least I do. And so I don't know why Patton's not there saying, you know, like soldiers, spam never dies. Actually, it doesn't fade away. So anyway, but this is a very important thing. And then after you go through the history, you get to travel down this international, like kind of It's a Wonderful World, It's a Small World, excuse me, exhibit of all the places where spam is now really, really popular, especially in the Pacific, Japan, Korea, especially the Philippines and Hawaii. They go crazy in Hawaii over spam. I had a parishioner in San Luis Obispo who was from Hawaii, which her husband was Anglo, and they would go to Hawaii half of the year, and she would always, when she'd fly back, have a suitcase dedicated just to filling it up with spam that she would take back to her family. Now they have a Costco, so she doesn't have to worry about that suitcase. But yeah, that popular. So anyway, you can learn about all the countries and all the recipes that they have. And then, of course, there's a room where it's dedicated to the Monty Python song, and Spam-A-Lot, and everything else, so that's really fun. And then, there's just so much. And then you can find out how spam is made. They make it look like it's made with just the shoulder and the rump of the pig, but I'm guessing it's more than that. Anyway, and then you can figure out, and then you can even try it out on your own. You can make spam on your own, and kids love to do it, so they get dressed up in these little white coats, and you can have your picture taken then with, the kid can have his picture taken with the spam that he's created, which is a really nice little touch. And then there's, these They're kind of unwieldy. I need them. Anyway, this is an exhibit of canjos. They're banjos made of Spam cans. And actually, they make really great music. I mean, you can't believe, like, what else are they going to come up with, right? I mean, that's just kind of the feeling that you have when you go to the Spam Museum and when you go to the gift shop afterwards, which of course is a must, where you can not only get Spam t-shirts, Spam pajamas, Spam ink pencils, Spam watches, Spam earrings, and I bought for myself, because I knew that I would need this coming from LA to Appleton, a Spam ice scraper. So this was my first gift I gave to myself as I came to Wisconsin. I could not have been happier. Actually, you know, I left the Spam Museum in such an upbeat, happy mood. I never had anticipated it. But it was just this 90 minutes of surrounding myself in this playful, creative, fun world that was about something that's really gross. I mean, let's face it, Spam. That's right, that's why the email that we hate to get is called what? Spam. Because it's all over the place, like you know, like that Spam song, spam, 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 spam. And nobody wants it, and you put it away, you put it away as soon as you can. Maybe there's a little bit of the Spam email that's helpful, but most of it is just yucky junk. So let's face it, it makes fun of this product that is pretty gross. But that also has an important part of our history. We want to revere it for all that it's done. It's an important place in our culture, and the fact that there are other cultures for whom it's still very valuable and revered product. And the fact that it feels like when they created the Spam Museum, they got creative people in a room and they just said, come up with whatever ideas you can and just go with it. Do it well, and we'll put it in the museum. It's just this kind of celebration of human creativity and human playfulness. And it kind of gives you a feeling, if they can do this with Spam, we can do it with anything. I can't imagine actually a better way to spend my 4th of July. Or you, if you're in the area. So I'm talking about Spam today, not only because I love to talk about Spam, but also because I think it speaks to us, or can help us understand better what Jesus is talking about when he says, if any would be my follower, pick up your cross and follow me. And if anyone is ashamed of me, my words, or my cross, the Son of Man will be ashamed of you when you come in the day of judgment. This idea of something that nobody seemed to want to acknowledge, wanted to talk about, this item we know as the cross. Now we see the cross all over the place in our culture. We come to church and we expect to see crosses. They're maybe as prevalent in our world as Spam. But I think we don't let ourselves acknowledge that for many people, this the symbol is as gross as a can of Spam, even grosser. Not only is it a symbol of violence because Jesus was violently executed on the cross, but even more so because the church today, and let's face it, has done so many violent, awful things in the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus, so many have been killed. In the name of Jesus, so many have been raped. In the name of Jesus, so many have been stolen from and embezzled from. We may not see it, but the outside world does, and really has no interest in any faith tradition that would have this as its symbol. Now, it's also true that the church has been a place of great salvation and very good things in the larger scope, you know, probably civil rights for African Americans and even for women. large part grew out of the church, even as the church continued to oppress people. But many of the things that we know in our own lives, in our own communities, the many, many good things that the church does out in the community and in our hearts. And we never want to forget that either. But we also can embrace the truth that this was the very problem that the ancients had in dealing with this symbol. We may think everybody glorified in the fact that Jesus died on the cross in the ancient world, but in the ancient world, the cross was a really gross symbol. It was a symbol of the Roman Empire. It was a symbol of execution, and more importantly, even beyond how painful crucifixion was, it was an extremely shameful death. That was the most important thing about crucifixion, is that it shamed the person who was sitting there on the cross. Because you'd be hanging there without clothes, and in the ancient world especially, you don't show your body. It's very shameful for your skin to be exposed. And here you're just out there for all the world to see. And usually you'd be plopped on this cross just on the edge of town, so everybody could see you as they came in and out of town. And your death was very slow, so you had to think about how awful this was. Slowly gravity would take you down and down and down, and you eventually suffocate. You didn't die on the first day. At night, the animals could come and pick at you. You had no control over anything. It was just awful. What made it especially awful is that only slaves and oppressed people would be crucified. Citizens would never. In fact, citizens weren't even supposed to say the word crucifixion. It was sort of Rome's dirty little secret, because the crimes that she would be crucified for were stealing and treason, things that upset the apple cart of the empire. So this is really a sign of the empire asserting itself, saying, don't you become like this person on a cross. This is what the cross meant in the ancient world. And now the Christians were saying, God came to earth and died on this. And this was also just a crazy, crazy thing for Christians to be suggesting. Because the idea of a God coming to the earth and dying and rising again, that was not anything new in the Christian story. What was unique and really scandalous about the Christian story is that God came to earth and died and rose again from one of these. No self-respecting God in the ancient world would ever be caught near or a cross. And here's Jesus dying and rising from it. It was beyond imagining. It was asinine. In fact, the earliest artwork we have in Christianity is a little bit of graffiti that shows a man hanging on a cross with a donkey's head. Because that's just how idiotic and stupid Christian faith was. Now, we know that it's important that Jesus died and rose again from the cross. And we should claim that the beauty of this crazy message and the truth of this crazy message is that by proclaiming that God would come to earth and be seen and die and rise from the cross, we are saying that God's love and God's grace and God's light will go anywhere. It will go into the darkest, deepest, most painful, most shameful parts of our lives and parts of our culture, the parts that we don't ever like to talk about, that we think nobody will ever understand if we tell anybody that's in us or that's in our society. God goes there and God seeks to redeem those places more than any. Perhaps you've had that experience yourself or with a loved one. We also know that the cross tells us that God goes to any message that society will say to keep things in line and to make people feel ashamed of who they are so they can stay in power. The cross says, no, that's completely wrong. There's no such thing as making a person feel shameful for who they are. It's one of the great messages we can say as people who are gay, who are supporters of the gay world, to acknowledge that that this is part of God's wonderful creation. There's nothing to be ashamed about, or that we need to be ashamed about in declaring it proudly to the world. I think Paul started addressing this problem, that the cross was really shameful and embarrassing and yet important, by saying, you know what? You're right, it's a shameful, embarrassing thing, and we're fools. We're fools of Christ. We're crazy nut jobs, like people at the Spam Museum say, how many different ways can we wave this thing in front of people and say, aha, isn't this great? We love the cross. Let's hang it on the wall. Let's hang it on our necks. Let's kiss it. Let's wave it at parades. Let's do anything we can and shock people with how great this symbol is. Even though you may think it's gross, and you may think it's something to be hidden under a barrel. I think this is the opportunity that we have as Christians today, and a challenge and an opportunity to say that we not only are Christians, and we not only follow this cross, and we know that it carries a lot of baggage, but we are going to have fun with it. We're going to make fun of it. We're going to make fun with it. We're going to see how many creative ways we can be Jesus cross bearers in the world. We're not going to get scared and pull back. And I'm super excited as I hear and come to this church and I hear about how excited people are about participating in the Pride Parade. It's such a fun thing to hear people of all sorts talk about getting ready and having our float and having our booth and what are we going to give away? Last year we gave away tattoos, and what can we do this year? We're going to have a good time, and we're going to not have any people at the church because everybody's going to be out in the parade. And I mean, that's just like so great. I tell people that, you know, how engaged our congregation is and how much fun they have in the Pride Parade, and they can't believe it. They're like, really? Your church is that cool? I'm like, yes, and fun. And it wasn't me, it was somebody else. Said, well, let's have fans this year. So we're going to be giving away rainbow fans at the booth that say, I'm a fan of the United Methodist Church of Palm Springs. And we can give those away, we can fan ourselves, and we can just have a lot of fun. And we're going to have this great float with Ginger Snap. Who else what other church floats going to have Ginger Snap as the queen of your float? And we're going to be able to wave our fans at Ginger Snap, because we're fans of Ginger Snap, and wave at the people of Palm Springs, because we're fans of Palm Springs, and wave at God, because we're big fans of Jesus, and we're big fans of God, and we're just going to have such silly, joyful, over-the-top fun. Like the Spam Museum, but better. And I get to wear, once again, my giant Bible costume that is like a giant can of Spam, except it's the living person version of the Bible, and I'll have my rainbow tights, and my rainbow flag, and my rainbow fan, and I'll be prancing next to the float, saying, rejoice, and be gay always. This is us. This is us giving the good news. This is us being fools of Christ. This is us teaching the world that if we can have fun doing this, and we can be creative and loving and community building in this, we can be loving and creative and hopeful in everything. And come be a part of our wonderful, fun, adventurous, foolish community. So I invite you to keep the project in your prayers, keep the Pride Parade in your prayers. Think about how you might want to do something fun for it, or other fun ideas that you have for ministry here at the church. We've been coming up with some great ideas as we've had our Let's Talk Church meetings, just brainstorming as part of just our regular conversation, and I just am so looking forward to seeing what other wonderful ways we will be the Spam Museum, and then some. So I know that, so I ask your prayers for that, and I also know that there's probably a little hesitation right now as we're winding down the sermon, winding down our message, we're coming into communion. You're saying, oh my gosh, Spam for communion? Did Pastor Jane possibly want us to partake of this? Today, we're just going to enjoy the fact that the Lord's meal and Spam, they're both holy mysteries.